Good morning. First I've got some apologies from Councillor Dorian Smith, Councillor Marcus and Councillor Bennett. I would like to invite Aisling to the table, please. Could I have any declaration of interests, please? No. Minutes from the previous meeting. Any questions? Councillor Smith. Yeah, we did have a response from Councillor Davis, and we passed that on to Dr. Pitkin, and it seems to have been, it was suggested that they meet and talk, so I haven't heard any more about that. Any more questions? I just have one question on page 4. It was suggested by Councillor Marcus that responses raised by councillors to be answered by Mrs. Rachel Murray. Have we had those answers? Questions, Bob? I haven't seen any.
No, Chairman, I haven't received anything from Rachel, but I can follow up with her. This is about the well, we're now into spring, so it was in relation to the winter planning. So, but some of those aspects would be relevant.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, just a comment, Chairman. Halfway down the part, I think it's quite ironic an improved provision for freight, including an enhanced crane function, and also question on Stuart Reid said on page 6. He said he could find those figures. These are the ones about breakages. And share them with the committee members. Has that happened as well?
I haven't seen anything. Bob, has that happened?
No, I haven't received anything, but again, I'm happy to follow up with Mr. Reid. Thanks.
I think we might well ask the steamship company to attend one of our meetings to give us an update on the Marley Rose. I mean, we all know that it's going to go, but I think it would be a good idea to have them invite to the next meeting, maybe.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I did put a bid in of £1, but it was refused.
Thank you. Right, could I have a proposer, please? And seconder? Right, all those in favour? Thank you. Appointment of independent persons, a verbal report from the Deputy Monitoring Officer. Good morning, Stephen. Sorry, hang on a minute, Stephen, I can't hear you.
We can barely hear you, Stephen. Can you keep talking, please?
Can you just keep talking and we'll see if we can get it louder? Not here, all right. No, not yet.
Have you properly connected those speakers to you?
Sorry about this.
Just speak again, would you please, Stephen?
Still can't hear you. Andy, what are we going to do? Can you get them on the phone? Going to try getting you on the telephone. I think a few words to the IT department, don't you?
Hello, Stephen. Right, I just need to. Which is it? Speaker.
The picture's gone off, by the way, so I can't see what's going on at the meeting.
No.
Okay.
Well,
Can you still hear us?
I can hear you, but I can't see anything that's going on at the meeting, so I'm just treating it like a telephone call at the moment.
can everybody hear? Yeah, we can hear you, Stephen, but we can't see you. So we can, if you'd like to go ahead. Thank you.
The independent person was advertised, and there was no initial response. So we received a response very late, which we have agreed to accept. And then you have to arrange tomorrow morning with your chair.
That's correct.
Yeah. There is one question that did arise during the discussion, and that is the level of the remuneration for the post. And the current remuneration just over £100. But the feedback that we got from those who we would have expected to apply, that was not really very adequate. And so I wanted to raise with you the issue of increasing the remuneration as a recommendation to council for as part of the member's allowance.
Yes, that's correct. I think we emailed all the committee, and I think the consensus was that it should be put up to £500. If everybody,
Well, that was my recommendation.
that was your recommendation, wasn't it?
Be able to resolve that today as a recommendation to council, then that would be part of the whole report to council at the annual meeting.
Okay. Has anybody got any comments about that? Shall we just go straight ahead with Councillor Smith?
I would agree that that's a much more sensible level to go at, so I propose that recommendation £500.
Right. Could I have a seconder, please? All those in favour? That's carried. Stephen?
Excellent, thank you, Joe. The other matter I wanted to raise is that now that that has been increased, we were talking about having at least 2 independent persons. So, do I have your authority to reissue the advertisement to attract any others?
Yes, certainly.
Fine, thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Any questions about that? No? Thank you very much. Right, now we go to agenda item 7. Going to bring that up first because the senior officers are here and I'm sure they've got plenty of work to do. So who's presenting that? Do you want to present this, Bob?
Thank you, Chairman. This was a report put together on behalf of the committee because of an interest in maintaining a handle on the current status of various capital programme projects in the 2018-19 capital programme. Since then, there's been some restructuring in terms of the approach for the 1920 capital programme, thanks to the kind of Section 151 officer. However, this is the update as was at March 2019. These different projects have got red, amber and green colour codes on. These are simply an indication of progress as opposed to any implications for actual risk to the council. That's a separate project currently being undertaken around risk management, and obviously we have the internal audit as well providing their independent assurance. Okay. Thankfully, I've had apologies from one of the senior managers who's got a meeting with ministry over today. But if members do have questions about any of these projects or the process, then I would defer to them for their expertise. Thank you.
Has anybody any questions? Councillor Smith.
Just a few clarification questions. On paragraph 11, so that we get updates to the committee on how that happens.
Sorry, I missed what you said then. Sorry, could you repeat what you said then?
How often the updates of the capital programme go to the council?
Bob? Yes.
Oh, well, there's two. One is the updates to full council, and I think that the Section 151 officer had a plan to do that on a either quarterly or 6-monthly basis. For the Scrutiny Committee, at the moment, what we have is an annual kind of review as the capital programme for 2020-21 is put together, and potentially there is scope for an interim report such as this to come at 6 months. However, there is a balance to be made to what is going to be reported to council anyway on that quarterly or 6-monthly basis. So there's a potential risk of duplicating effort. So at the moment, this is at the moment where we're at. So.
It's the feedback from. Just one quick question about the Garrison Play Park. Where are we? 14, the inspection report, where are we?
Yeah, so we had an inspection of all of our play parks, not just Garrison. So we looked at one on Porth Cressa and the ones on the off islands. So we've got the inspection report, which kind of risk rates all the different things that need to be done. So there's nothing as significant as we had feared. So when we put the capital programme together, we put in a worst case scenario. So it's not looking like that, but currently we are getting quotes, and that's taking longer, as it always does, than we'd hoped. But once we're aware of what the total sum will be for those repairs, we're working also with the community. As you know, there's some really good crowdfunding going on. It's been fantastic with lots of discos for small people and quiz nights at the Atlantic and a bucket in the co-op. So we're working with the community to identify how we will kind of make these improvements. But it doesn't look like 20,000 currently, but it's good.
Okay.
I know that there's been an inquiry from the media that the implication from the report is that it will only happen if we get all the money from the community. I think until we know total costs, I don't think that that's definitely the case. I think, I think there's a huge desire to make these things happen, but they just need to be affordable in terms of revenue. But I think we'll be all right.
That's good.
Oh,
Keep us updated at full council.
Of course,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you
And
have any idea
we'll
how,
all go up there.
have you any idea how long it's going to be before we get a quote?
No, we're chasing.
Right, okay.
Just a minor correction on paragraph 24, it's dinghies and road paths, record. Just also want to check on the, sorry, moving on to our page 56 on the extra replacement vessel. Is that correct? The receipts from sale for the previous vessel is £17.25. No.
17,000.
That's what I thought.
Good old eBay.
Wait, there's a few dots in the wrong place here.
17,250. So they're moving on to page 57, the Fryer water operations utility vehicle. Yeah, was that the expenditure on that? Was that budgeted there? Was that in budget?
Yes, Chairman, that was actually in the capital programme, that was actually approved, so that was within budget.
Right. Then on the next page 58, on the biodiesel, what's the timescale for completion on that?
So, Chairman, we did some considerable work last week, so it is ongoing. Not quite sure of the specific timetabling in terms of when that project will be complete, but it will be dependent, obviously, on the on resource of operational services to be able to complete the works, as well as waiting for, I think, some additional kit and equipment to come over and potentially some other work. But I can certainly find that out from Helen Richards, who's leading on that project.
Yeah, I think that'd be useful. I understand. So, update to full council at some point.
Yeah.
And then the next item, the flood and coastal list. I mean, through A and B, I know we can do that quite well. It does seem to be behind. Is that fair to say? Where are we on the flood and coastal management works?
Right, so we've been on quite a journey, I think, with this one. So effectively, still waiting for approval from DEFRA for the European funding, and also looking for the match funding as well from the Environment Agency. So there has been a considerable amount of work that's been ongoing. I think we had expected to have received all the funding at the moment, but that's still ongoing. So all the cases have been made. There is some additional work being done. And also at the moment as well, we're doing some prep work for the planning consents that will be required for the major schemes as well. So at the moment, we're using a consultant or a firm of consultants to undertake the environmental impact assessments, which will be required as part of the planning process. So we're trying to get ahead of ourselves, but there is still some issues in terms of the final funding agreements.
And will all the sites be considered as one big programme?
That's the idea, yes. So although they're separate projects, it is all part of the wider programme.
Okay, thank you. Just moving on to the following page 59, the early years provision. Just the way I read the two boxes on the right, to create 3 and 4-year-old nursery places and manage child family, which, yeah, we've understood we've obviously going through. But then the box to the right says that actually Dinghy's class is providing that, it has that capacity to provide mutual support. And that kind of seems to contradict each other in the clarification on that.
Right,
It's on page 59.
59, thank you.
Early years provision.
Well, Dinghy's has been equipped to provide additional spaces, and so it has met the demand so far. The issue being that there's no holiday provision, so that's one of the reasons why we need to have another choice for parents. So pleased to say that we've got practical completion now on the build, and we went out to the market just before the Easter break for a provider. We had 2 really strong applications, and we've been able to appoint, but I'm not in a position to say who that is, but it's going to be really good.
They have been appointed.
There's been an appointment made, yeah. hoping to get that provision up and running as soon as possible. But there are processes for registration of facilities that can take some time. So it can be up to 6 weeks for a DBS, and it can be up to 20 weeks to register as an early years provider. But we're going to have conversations with the relevant government departments to see if we can accelerate it given the need on the islands. And I'm aware that it has been a real worry for working families. But I think it's going to be good. We've got a very, very, very strong provider in place.
That's encouraging.
Yeah.
So last page, page 60, the education-based needs. So this, it sounds like a kind of a reserve pot.
So what it is, well, it can be used for a variety of things, but basic need is when you're looking at new pupils, and then there's school condition. So what happens is every local authority receives that amount of money for the schools in their area, and the schools in their area put in bids asking, putting a short business case together about what they would like to invest in, and then the local authority decides, looking at all the priorities across their area, which things that they will support. Obviously, it's slightly different here. We have one school, but I have said, just in terms of audit purposes, I still would like them to fill out 2 pages of a business case explaining what it is they want to do, and they have got some ideas in the pipeline. And so we've just got to hold it. So it sits there on our capital programme, but we aren't going to be spending it, but we approve its spend in line with, legislation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And likewise, the next part of the school condition is quite a lot of money, isn't it?
Yes, well, we've been,
Again, so just to get a feel for what that'd be used for.
well, there's a variety of things they could use it for. I mean, it depends, the multi-use games area needs repairing. They might need to have an additional classroom. So again, it's about the academy thinking about what their priorities are. And we have got quite a lump of money because actually once we went into the conversion process, we decided as the landlord of the school estate to put everything on hold until we kind of worked out what the kind of investment priorities might be. But yeah, they are fortunate. And obviously one of the great things is that the local authority got funding for a brand new building. Therefore, there haven't been the demands for repairs, which has been good. Actually, it has been a really kind of sustaestainable building.
So in a sense, we're kind of fund holders again for that.
Just the fund holders.
And does that stay in the pot?
Yes, and then, I mean, for example, we had in our mind that we would spend some money on the boarding house.
Yeah.
Actually, with the academy, we thought another pot of money to do that up. So that's kind of, again, there is just this money there for them to think about. And it can be used on any aspect of the school estate. So you could also think about the housing that's associated with teaching staff. So anything that sits within that envelope, when we did the commercial transfer, they can invest in.
A kind of a one-off pot of money that's going to sit there until it's spent, is that right?
Yeah, but we get some every year based on the size of our school. The local authority gets another allocation, and that will just go there and sit there, and then we make the academy aware of what's available to them.
And what amount do we do?
It varies.
Right.
So this year we've got nothing, but next year we might get more. It just changes year to year depending on what the national priorities are.
Okay, that's much clearer. Thank you. And then just a couple of questions on the EV and the business energy scheme. Well, firstly, on the business energy efficiency scheme, Shane Nicholas not here. Do you know when the start date actually? Because it has been pushed back, hasn't it? The start date. Anybody got any idea on that?
Perhaps we could ask Nicola that question, and she could email us the answers.
And likewise on the EV scheme. I think because it's a very big project, I think I'd like to see more of a progress report on where we are, just to understand on spending. It's a lot of money in that program project. So it'd be good for and Scrutiny to know where we are.
Okay, we will ask Nicola to give us a progress report. Okay, Bob. Councillor Nellams.
Oh, thank you, Chair. It's really echoing what Councillor Smith said about the flood and coastal erosion grants and monies, because there was quite a big project there were 2 big projects on Tresco, and they were both approved. One then was done by Tresco Estate itself because it couldn't wait. And the other one, monies were approved, the project was approved, and as Craig said, it's all been held up, and it was really just making inquiries on that, because it was, at the time, it was approved, monies were meant to be coming, and they didn't get anywhere. Meanwhile, that beach is eroding every year, and it's quite an important position. Tresco could be sort of cut in 2 in a sense. But if Craig assures me that the work's been going on, and again, it's sort of come through AOMB. I know I've been keeping in touch with AOMB, and it's just, you'll be going through a minefield of paperwork to sort of get there in the end. But it is quite worrying because it was probably 3 years ago when it actually happened, and we were approved, the island was approved a year later, and we're still waiting. So, but yeah, your answer was as it was. Thank you.
Chairman, I'm not sure if I can add anything as well. I mean, there's still continuing work to be done. So there's still baseline mapping, there's modelling. So I'm not saying the goalposts keep changing, but obviously the amounts of information, required for the business cases does seem to be, expanding slightly. But I mean, I know Julian Pearce, who works with me very closely, is obviously working on this. And so hopefully there will be, hopefully an end in sight. So we can actually, obviously obtain the money and actually start on with these projects.
Yeah, because at the time it was part of the sort of emergency funding that was going to come instantly, and then that sort of graduated onto the main project. So we await that with interest. Thank you.
Let's hope we don't have to wait too long. Are there any more questions? We have some recommendations, don't we? We have some recommendations that members consider and note progress against the 2018-19 capital programme, that the revised capital strategy setting out the council's governance procedures for the prioritisation, approval and monitoring of all capital investment be presented for consideration to the Scrutiny Committee in the autumn of 2019 as part of the 2020-2023 medium-term financial planning process. Could I have a proposer for that, please? Councillor Nellams, seconder. Councillor Smith, all those in favour? Carried, thank you.
You need us?
No, we
Are you
don't.
sure?
I don't think we need
Are
you
you
anymore.
sure? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much for coming, giving your time. I know you're busy. Right, now we go to agenda item number 5, internal audit block 1. And I do believe we've got Robin Pritchard on the phone, I hope.
I'm going to see if we can do one conference. Stephen, can you, if you're still there, great. I'm going to try and add somebody else to the conference call, so you may go quiet for a moment. Oh, splendid. Thank you. Oh, hello, Robin. It's Bob here. Hello. I'm just trying to add you to the conference call on the phone. So, hopefully, press the next button. You'll be in the room with our monitoring officer, also dialing in. Aha, hi Robin.
Can you hear down there? Can somebody talk on the phone? Can you hear you? Robin, good morning. We're just going to get some people to come and sit a bit closer to the phone. I'm sure there'll be some questions for you, Robin. Thank you, Robin. Sorry we can't get you on the screen. We're all huddled round the phone now, so if you would like to send your report. Yes, I think that'd be a good idea.
So you'll see in 1.3 of the report, what we did was we went to an analysis and reconciliation between formal records and records that were being produced on the island. And there were some inconsistencies, so those were resolved. The second part of the report in 1.4 and 1.5 just deals with sharing of information in the future so that both sides are operating from the same information. So what we've done is we've resolved access to the age debtors summary on a monthly basis, and that should sort it out for the future so that everybody's chasing the same debt. Are there any questions on that one?
Any questions? No, carry on.
The next one is active silly. I think the main point coming out of this is simply advertising of the facilities, and you'll see in powers 3.2 and 3.5 reference to use and development of the website to facilitate both bookings and collection of cash, and hopefully boost income in relation to active silly and what you have got. 3.7 does deal with a little control point where we found that bank paying in books were being circulated around different paying in points throughout the council. So we just suggested that everybody sticks to the same paying in book that they usually use, and that makes reconciliation a lot easier for everybody. Anything on active silly?
I think there has been quite a lot of advertising of active silly, and hopefully that it's going well. Bob, would you like to say something?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I spoke with the new manager for Active Silly, and they're putting together a new business case, and they're also covering a lot of the kind of health and well-being aspects as well around older and younger people. So I think it's all going in the right direction.
Thank you. Any questions? Carry on.
Okay, so the next one is grants. I think 1.3 and 1.4 are probably the key paragraphs here, where what we're signposting is that during the period between 2015-16 and the date of this audit, there were several things happening within the council. So you had new members, you had new committee structures, you had new officers coming in with new responsibilities, and you had this revision of financial regulations which was going on. And I think what we've detected here is that there wasn't a sound process for generating ideas, for grant income, and then managing the project from inception all the way through to approval, and then monitoring through the budget monitoring system. So what the report is saying is in 1.5, it's important to, when the new financial regulations are in place, make sure that the council understands what is the process for approving budgets in the first place, and then managing anything that is not in the budget beyond that, which would include grants. And therefore that will make budgetary control reports much more accurate and meaningful going forward. The role of scrutiny is something that we've pointed to within that, because your current terms of reference do provide for you to have a scrutiny role in relation to these major projects that are occurring. And that's something that I think you probably need regulations and contract monitoring procedures. So stop on that.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Robin. I think that's, hello. I think that's yeah, a point very well made. In fact, we just had a recent example of that in the last full council where there were some applications made for some smart islands projects which didn't come through either scrutiny or full council to start with. So again, I think we've still got some issues around procedure there. And I think it's good that you flagged that up. And we do need to, I think, be clear on what the role of scrutiny is, because we did talk about significant progress. We should have some pre-decision scrutiny going on in our committee. That would seem like a simple go forward. So clearly some actions need to happen around that.
I think there's also, well, I know there is in the Block 2 report on budgetary control, there's also reference in there and a response from Russell to making sure that significant projects are managed through the scrutiny process with smaller grants being managed through the offices. And that is certainly logical and what happens in most places.
Yeah, and I think there's the two issues. There's the one how they're managed through the budgetary process, but also what happens before the applicate or in the process of applications, to find out whether it's actually a good business case in the first place before we even have the money change hands. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And in regard to the two projects that I mentioned there in paragraph 1.2, if you track back through the years, there are minutes of meetings where things have been approved, and in normal circumstances, those would then form the basis of budgetary provision and financial monitoring in the future. And clearly, that probably hasn't happened as timely as it should have done in the past.
Yes, I think we need to spend a bit of time on building this into our work plan as well. Hopefully we'll have an informal soon, and I'll talk to Bob and we'll get it all into the work plan. Any more questions?
Can I just ask a question, Chairman?
Yeah. Oh, yes, Stephen, sorry.
I'm just thinking that another element that hasn't been mentioned really is the role of the lead members in this, and whether or not the lead member should also be involved in such discussions.
Robin, what do you think of that?
I think it's up to the council to build in whatever procedures it wishes to follow within the revised funds regulation. So clearly at the moment there is a role for scrutiny. Lead members have certainly got a role with regard to various aspects of the council business. It's just a question of how you involve them and make sure there is an agreed protocol. Because what you don't want is uncertainty as to who's doing what, whether it's between members or whether it's between members and officers.
And that's why I think it needs to be just factored in, just as part of the discussion, so that side is clarified, so that people know where they stand in the process.
Yes, I think perhaps when we have our workshop to discuss this, I would quite like to invite the interim chief executive to comment at the workshop on this and see what we can sort out, and maybe the lead member for finance as well.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll set that up. Any more questions? No more questions?
Okay, next one is council tax and business rates. 1.1, 1.2 are really saying that there's a very strong performance by the Cornwall Council team in terms of collections. 1.3 does point to a snag that we found where the building regulations team at Cornwall weren't notifying the council tax team of buildings that were now complete and where council tax should be collected. So the council tax team were checking 6 that we identified at the time of audit to bring those onto the council tax database. That weakness has the issue then remains, how accurate is are the silly council tax and business rate database? So the more important recommendation is probably the one that talks about doing an inspection of the database to make sure that all properties are actually on there. Therefore, you're maximising your income. The associated point is in 1.4. What we noticed were a lot of properties that were now being taken off council tax and included as holiday lets. Because clearly there is a tax advantage there to people who have got holiday lets. So the Russell is following up what is taking place at the national level with regard to future charging of council tax on holiday lets. So there may be more advice to give there in the future. But 1.4 is really saying that if you're taking people off council tax and they're therefore having to pay business rates, they should be paying for their waste to be collected. So what we were recommending there was that there is a reconciliation between two systems so that operational services are able to charge for waste collection and observe waste collection from holiday lets to make sure that those people are paying. When we came across in February, we did follow that up, and it looks as if from the 1st of April 2019, that reconciliation is possible. So they will be putting extra attention to that to make sure that you maximise the council tax, the waste collection income.
Right, thank you. Any questions? No? Oh, sorry, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, just going on the trade waste, is it you saying there could be an issue here, or you're saying there is an issue here with lack of trade waste income?
I think I'm saying there could be an issue, but there were significant numbers of properties that were, for obvious reasons, being taken off council tax and put onto business rates because no council tax is then payable. So because of the numbers, it's likely that the waste collection database needs updating to reflect those changes.
Any more questions? No more questions, Robin?
Okay, sickness management, by and large, a lot of good practice taking place. You are moving to Cornwall Council ERP system, so there's a need time to update your procedures. The significant comments are in 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 perhaps, where we're talking about more proactive management of return to work and trigger point interviews by managers, and that's been reacted to by the council. And the only other point is in the 1.5, 1.6, where we're talking about performance management reporting and supporting monthly reports with some narrative in relation to how difficult cases are being managed. But nothing else to say on that one.
Any questions? No? Carry on.
Okay. There are some follow-up of previous recommendations, and they're all a bit dated now, I think. The only one which I remember members asking a question about last time was St Mary's Airport car park charges. We did follow that up again in February. Craig has then just received some new legal advice from Cornwall Council, and I don't know what the outcome of that is yet, so we'll follow that up on our next visit.
We will wait in anticipation. Councillor Smith.
Just a question on, really to Chairman and Bob, regarding the sponsors board update to Scrutiny. Hasn't happened? What's the procedure on this?
I'll ask Bob to answer that.
And a report was drafted, and under an agreed kind of consultation process, it was shared with the Chairman of Council and Vice Chairman of Council, also Craig Dryden, and the Interim Chief Executive. So following that discussion, the Chief Executive requested that the report not be sent to this meeting, and there will be some further development around the sponsors board, but we have no information today.
All very mysterious. I think, yeah, I think the point is that, you know, I think several members have said that really we should be seeing this information. So whatever mechanism it is, it needs to come before members at some point.
I'll have a word with the acting chief executive after the meeting. Any more questions? No. Okay, Robin.
Okay, so moving on to block 2 then, which took place in February, March time. There are 4 audits within the block. The first being budgetary control, where we saw a much improved position with regard to financial management, regular reporting, regular use of reports. The significant point again coming back in 1.3, 1.4 is this business of making sure that the financial regulations that I think are now planned for August 2019 are comprehensive and relate to the circumstances of the island, particularly in relation to the scheme of delegation. Because quite clearly the scheme of delegation should give authority, particularly from a financial point of view, at the appropriate levels to the size of the council's budget. And 1.4, again, we're talking about the grant application and scrutiny process and making sure that that's included within the financial regulations, and therefore appropriate approvals are reflected and captured within budgetary control reports. 1.5 makes a suggestion that job descriptions need to be updated to reflect budgetary control responsibilities, and that's been agreed by the authority. I wasn't proposing to say any more on that one.
Any questions? No?
The next area then is property maintenance. I think it's important here just to recognise that the review was not of the entirety of operational services, because they obviously do a lot more than maintain properties. Particularly what we were focusing upon was housing maintenance and maintenance of council properties. But as part of that, we've picked up a sort of a host of recommendations that will impact upon other aspects of operational services. The major points are probably reflected in 2.2 and 2.3, where the council at the time were awaiting the outcomes of stock condition surveys on both the council property and the social housing stock. And clearly there is an expectation that there will be backlog maintenance. And that raises the question of, have operational services got the resources or the skill base to actually deliver upon the needs? So you'll see in the recommendations and the management responses that they are going to review the position with regarding property maintenance for the future, and then out of that will arise whether there's a need for operational services to get involved in this area. As you move down the report, you'll see in 2.4 we're suggesting the council move to a single database for job allocation and control. At the moment, it was a combination of spreadsheet-based systems and paper-based systems, and therefore there were disagreements regarding the position on various jobs on a regular basis. So we've suggested they move on from that, and the operational services team introduce a job card system upon which all time, resources, materials costs, and equipment details are captured. And then hopefully that will make discussions between the various departments a lot easier and introduce effective job control. There was a spreadsheet that was being used to manage the charging for jobs between operational services and the various council departments. And what we noticed was that spreadsheet got the wrong rates within it, so it was being used, so jobs were being charged at a cost rate rather than a full cost rate, and therefore any overheads weren't being recharged to the departments. At the same time, the manager, senior officer for maintenance and repair, wasn't completing the timesheet. So any time on jobs that he was involved with also wasn't being charged. So the outcome of all of that is that the costs are remaining within operational services rather than in the departments who have received the service. So I think that now that has all been subject to recalculation and will be reflected in the 2018-19 outcomes. There's a lot there, so perhaps stop at that stage and answer any questions.
Any questions? Councillors? Sorry.
Really an observation that I'm glad that's been picked up, that things aren't going to go through at cost, but at the full rate that it should be. Very sensible.
Councillor Sims?
I pretty much concur with everything there. I've had a number of conversations specifically with Nicola, and there are a number of issues which do need to be sorted out. I mean, one thing I think that we do need sort of a specific oversight on this, because Nicola has an awful lot to do, and sometimes somebody's doorknob somewhere is going to fall off the door possibly, but certainly the list, if you get my drift. So we perhaps need a more robust way of addressing this. So I think this is very useful set of findings for us.
Did you pick that up?
I didn't pick hardly any of that up.
Yeah, essentially saying it's very useful oversight. It's these things.
Councillor Smith?
It's a long way away.
Yeah, just a question really around 2.4, where you say, as a consequence, routine monitoring of progress by all sides is inefficient. Would you say that's due to a lack of capacity or processes?
Lack of process, definitely.
So it's all solvable, essentially.
Yeah, and it's a question of how live is the monitoring, whether it's within operational services or whether it's within either of the two user departments. And particularly in relation to sort of transparency regarding the costs that are actually being recharged.
Yeah, and picking up.
So I have talked to those in operational services regarding moving towards sort of hourly allocation of jobs, say, so rather than just get a time sheet back to basically 10 hours, moving to a job which would take you 3 hours. So introducing transparency right at the start of the job process.
And from what you're saying, it also suggests that the budgeting for operational services isn't right either. But it should be.
In what respect, sorry?
Well, you're saying that because jobs should be charged to the right department, it would suggest that if they're not, that the operational services budget is too high.
I think what will happen quite naturally now as a result of the review is that there will be more transparency regarding what happens within operational services. And within next year's audit plan, I've suggested that we cover the other parts of operational services to try and bring this all together to look at everything from vehicle maintenance through sewerage, highway, street cleaning, and then pick up the outcomes of the housing and council property stock surveys.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Sims?
I don't.
I think you might have to come down here, Steve.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Right. This isn't necessarily highlighted in the report, but there is also within the organisation a lack of expertise for sign-offs by external contractors, because sometimes what we've had has been a complete bodge, but it's not really been anybody in the organisation who can pick up on it.
Would you like to comment on that, Robin?
I think it's probably a true statement. I think operational services as an independent view provides a very traditional service, much in the way that it's provided probably for a number of years. And then therefore, in a way you do tend to rely upon particularly specialist external contractors. Your ability to manage them is fairly limited. But I think that's probably, that comment would probably also relate to internal monitoring of work as well. So where you're relying upon people in the housing team to monitor the work of operational services, that's a very difficult issue to tackle as well for the council.
Yeah. Okay, any more questions? No, right, next one.
On procurement, I think what we found here could be summarised by perhaps there's been a lull in the attention that's being given to procurement in between people occupying the posts. So the major points are about now that you've got a new senior officer in charge of procurement, that person becoming much more proactive in terms of analysis of spend, discussing spend with purchasing departments, and then looking for opportunities for better value for money for the future. And I think the information that's now available through the budget monitoring processes and the Cornwall systems will give the senior officer much more information in order to get a good procurement job done for the future.
Any questions? Councillor Sims.
Again, I mean, my inclination is to agree. Now, up until fairly recently, we had two very effective officers regarding procurement. Sean Parsons, for instance, for contract, and Rob, I don't remember his surname, Rob Roder, and we've lost, the organisation has now lost them, and I think we do need to find some sort of replacement people. Procurement is a really tricky area in the public sector.
Any comment, Robin?
I think absolutely correct. It is a specialist area, but it's better to put some attention to it than not at all. I think the person you've got is obviously new in post, will take time to settle. But it's an area that needs some attention in order to coordinate procurement wherever possible.
Councillor Watt.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just a comment really on paragraph 3.4. There is a case at times for open POs. Give you a good example. When, for instance, the IFCA RIB has to be refueled, we don't know exactly how many litres we're buying until they're actually put in there. So we don't know until the invoice comes back. So there is a case occasionally for open POs.
I just come back quickly on that. It's possible under the system we do have to set a very substantial figure on a purchase order and then kind of ramp up until you reach that threshold.
Yeah, just sort of picking up on that PO thing, I thought that all spending under the new financial system had to have a PO option. That's my impression. But I just sort of wanted to clarify, Robin, what you picked up there.
That's certainly true. I think what we might have picked up is people getting used to the new system as much as anything. But the important thing is to raise the issue so that in future everybody's aware that purchase orders should be raised. The point about open orders is, yes, absolutely right, they are appropriate in some circumstances. So what you need to do is to put controls around them as you use the open purchase orders. So it's not anybody who can go and fill up any vehicle, looking at fuel. It's not anybody that can go and get food back from them because of the purchase order it's only certain personnel and certain vehicles.
Yeah, thank you. I just also wanted to pick up on 3.2, where you say the current delegated levels are felt to be excessively high. Can you just unpack that a bit, please?
I haven't got a detail in front of me, but from memory, the chief executive's authorisation level is currently £15 million. Quite clearly, that's not what the head of the council budget. We don't want the chief executive being able to try to purchase order for £1 million without controls around it. So you need to have authorisation levels in place that are reflective of the knowledge of the organisation. And not just those that occupy with the Cornwall case.
way to remedy that be through the financial we approved?
Financial regulation support that with limits within the tendering arrangements to say what must happen at various levels of spend, and then within the purchase order system, you actually build authorization levels within the system so that above a certain level you have to go to the next level, and within certain levels those are the conditions made by the members and council.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up because I remember the last discussion with full council on financial regulations. There was quite a bit of debate on it, and it was certainly brought up as a concern and something to come back and look at. So, yeah, I'm sure many members would be pleased to read that.
Bob would like to say something.
Just very briefly, I mean, in terms of, there are some things that don't require purchase orders, but those are things like some grant payments, so there is a separate form to fill in for those. And in terms of my, where I am as grade 4 officer and some of my colleagues, we have a kind of delegated authority for £50,000, and I very rarely have to use that, but on the occasions that I do for grants or for corporate governance charges and audit charges, then actually that's incredibly useful in terms of the council as a whole. It just means we have the flexibility to pick up some of that responsibility.
Councillor Tim.
Regarding the CEO's sign off, I mean, there's one substantive thing he has to be able to sign off on the payroll, which is the big for every month. And he's just, he obviously that can't go through council. It would be ridiculous because people are not going to get paid sometimes. So the CEO has to have a degree of autonomy on that. And the contracts register, I think on 12, that was quite interesting. I'm hoping that this will be filtered out as the in the process of a reformation of our finances. Really, I think that a lot of the big stuff has been done now, and unclogging this type of pipe, if you like, is hopefully this will be the second or third tier of it. So I'm assuming that this will be dealt with. I'm aware that we have an awful lot of completely anachronistic nonsense still on the books, which needs to be get cleaned, really.
Any more questions?
I didn't catch the last part of that. About the contract, but the first part regarding approval of the payroll, don't confuse approval of purchase orders with approval for making payments. Two completely different things.
Yeah, it was just an illustration of the CEO needs a level of autonomy. And regarding the contracts register, I'm just more briefly, I think that I'm hoping that this will be sorted out in the reforming our finances process, essentially, which a lot of it's been done already, and this, perhaps the smaller stuff, will be addressed in the near future.
Really?
I think that was the intention regarding the contracts register, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? No. That's on.
Okay, so the final one then, health and safety. Within the responsibility of the environmental services team, there's been a lot of good work, particularly drawing together a draft health and safety policy and appropriate regulatory checks. But there's still some work to do. I think the bigger points coming out of the audit are the need to identify particular training needs, particularly around operational services perhaps, and then to divulge responsibility for health and safety from the responsibility of the environmental services team for carrying out a compliance function. So making sure that going forward everybody understands what the responsibilities are for health and safety, rather than simply just relying on the responsibilities of the environmental services team. So there's clearly two distinct functions there. The only other thing members might be interested in is 4.5. What we're suggesting is that there shouldn't really be any need for lead members of health and safety to attend the HAPAG meetings. Because what happens mostly now within the
Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Chairman. 4.5, the recent meeting actually appointed me as the lead member for HASAG. In fact, I've already attended 2 meetings.
Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just going to say I think it's a credit to the team involved and where we are on the health and safety aspects of the council at the minute. Seems to be a lot of good work that's been done. And as Councillor Watt just said, he's now on HASAG. And we did recently adopt the health and safety policy, didn't we? I think it was full council in March 2019. Just picking up on something you said actually on page 45 regarding the health and safety responsibility. Does that kind of suggest there could be a change in culture around health and safety in the council?
Yes, rather, yeah, I think it's probably the same point that I was making within the sickness monitoring arrangement around budgetary control, which is making sure that officers know what their responsibilities are at a day-to-day level, and then separate to that, those that are responsible for a compliance function are independent of the day-to-day processes.
So really to sort of sharpen up on it, essentially.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, Steve, Councillor Sims.
I was on HASAG as well a few years back, and this isn't a trivial point really, but I found the meetings really interesting, which is quite odd, because against insurmountable odds, it was interesting, which actually is indicative that there's a lot going on and there's awareness of it. So whether there's utility with a member attending or not, I'm not going to say really, but I found it extremely interesting. And if I was on HASAG, still, it wouldn't be a meeting I'd be thinking, oh no, and I'd try and get out of. So it's quite a positive process, which is still interesting because there's stuff going on.
Bob?
No, just an observation to provide further reassurance to members. I think now the council's emerging from, well, not out of the shadow yet of its financial challenges, that cultural aspect is now improving because we've got these approaches to health and safety and risk performance and things that have been lolling a little bit for a few years. So I think it's all part and parcel of very positive cultural change.
Thank you.
Chair, my only remaining comment on 4.5 and attendance at meetings by members is that we're very conscious of the member time is limited, and therefore making best use of time is often the way forward. I would accept, Councillor Smith made a point about the meeting being interesting. I don't get it's interesting, but it's a question of where the members pitch their time, the time that they've got available, the best use of the council. Another what we were trying to do there, as we do in other places, is to say there's no need to give up a couple of hours at a time if you can fulfil your responsibilities through receipt of the papers.
Okay, thank you. Any more comments? No. Are we ready to go through the recommendations? Got 2 bits here. Recommendations, that members note the recommendations and management responses for the internal audit block 1 report 2018-19 attached to appendix 1. Members provide such comments as they consider appropriate. Is it? Do you want to take all the recommendations together, block 1 and block 2? Is that all right, Stephen, to do that?
Yes, Chairman.
Right, we'll take block 1 and block 2 together. Should I have proposed? Councillor Sims, seconded by Councillor Nellam. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much, Robin.
No problems. Enjoy the summer. We'll see you later on.
We'll see you, when are you down next?
Maybe July, but certainly November, I think your meeting is timed for, so we'll be on the island at the same time.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Ben. Pleasure.
Bye.
Bye now.
Right, agenda item 8. Looking on standards in public life. Stephen, or are you presenting this?
Well, I'll defer to Stephen on this one.
Right. Stephen, would you like to take this one?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
This is really an update report and a request for a steer because there's a number of matters which have been put forward by the Committee on Standards in Public Life that it's important that the members are aware of, particularly with regard to reviewing the Code of Conduct and the ethical framework which operates on the Isle. As far as the report is concerned, you'll see that the recommendations of the Committee on Standards are divided into different categories. And what would be grateful for is going through the Table 1 and Table 3 to get an indication to what the members' priorities are and how they wish to progress this. Is that fine, Chairman?
Yes, that's fine. So we start with Table 1, which is on page 63.
Page 73, that's right.
63.
Okay, on mine it's 73, but that's fine.
Oh, right. Okay.
So, going through Table 1,
Yes.
the item 6, which is the recommendation about local authorities establishing a register of gifts and hospitality. What's the question there is the members of hospitality with a value in excess of £50 be listed in the publicly available register. At the moment, what the guidance is that you don't allow gifts of hospitality with a value in excess of £50 to be accepted at all.
Are there any, Councillor Smith?
Yeah, just ask a question on this. So is this in capacity as a councillor? I'm just trying to think of the scenario. So, I don't know, somebody invites you for lunch or very, very big lunch, I don't know, something like, I'm trying to sort of think of the scenario of where this would happen. And if so, yeah, and why it's not allowed at the minute, you know, so why the change, essentially?
Well, I suppose one example might be that if the steamship company invited you to a slap-up lunch, dinner and overnight hospitality, how would that be received and should that be registered if it was accepted?
Yeah, I think so my opinion on this would be, in some ways it's better not to accept, but then if one were to, then it's clearly much better that it's just transparent, and that might actually stop it happening in the first place.
Councillor Watt?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's a good point on hospitality, whether to accept it or not. For instance, it might cause offence if you don't accept it. I remember distinctly being bombarded, well, not bombarded, but I had several requests for weekend stays at the St Martin's Hotel when I was a tourism officer, and I turned everyone down because of the implications. Obviously, the other hotels will say, well, you'll favour them. And consequently, the manager at the time never spoke to me again.
Councillor Sims?
This hospitality thing, St Martin's Hotel again, Carmen at this time. My wife and I were invited over for an observatory dinner sort of launch thing in October. Now, this has nothing to do with the council. It was a press thing. Now, would that impact? I don't, and it never even occurred to me until this moment it could be an issue.
It is important I suppose, to understand in what context you are invited to this, if there is an official angle to it. And so one clue would be if it was addressed to Councillor Sims, I suppose. Another one would be what is the purpose of it and who else is invited. So I think it's going to be a bit of a value judgment. And there's no difficulty in either checking with either the Democratic Services people or with myself or the monitoring officer if there's any question about it. But usually it's patently obvious in reality as to why you have been invited.
Yeah, that's the clarification I wished for. And another thing, I think this is more cut and dried even. Say something's happening at Nuclear Airport, steamship company thing, it's a new thing, and I get invited as lead member for Clays to attend it, and they say we'll pay the ticket. Could that be an impact?
I missed the beginning of that. What's happening at the airport?
Something, I don't know, but they just recently had, Nuclear Airport is now doing flights to Heathrow, and they wanted, I think Robert possibly attended. Certainly somebody from the council attended it. Now, I don't know if flights were paid in this instance by the company, but if the flights were paid by the company, would that come into this criteria?
That would normally be acceptable to go because there would be a reason for someone from the council to go, but it would need to be declared.
Yeah.
In my view.
Yeah.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. Thank you.
But if the trip was to Caribbean, that might be
Bob.
Sadly, they don't fly to Barbados yet.
No, just, sorry, Stephen, just to clarify, the obviously the recommendation from the Committee on Standards and Public Life isn't obliging people to accept any offer of gift or hospitality of any value. So it's just, it remains within any kind of member's gift to kind of decline politely at their discretion.
Of course, there's no obligation to accept anything. What the Commission Standards is trying to do is to set forward a mechanism to ensure that any receipt of gifts and hospitality is transparent.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I've got to go now.
Councillor Sims.
Yeah, just quickly. So essentially, what this is really it's to keep us out of trouble rather than to get us into trouble. Yeah.
Exactly right.
Okay,
So, hospitality to be listed in the public available register. Have you any problems with that?
No.
See you all later.
Moving then onwards to the number 25 on the following page. It does recommend formal induction training be required. Obviously, members of the Council of the Isles of Scilly are independent, and therefore it's very much a matter for each individual member as to what training is undergone. But certainly training is provided, and so the issue then is whether or not members wish to commit to that.
Councillor Smith.
Well, my reflection on this was I think the induction training we all received in 2017 was very good and comprehensive, but maybe we should be reviewing our requirements for ongoing training. I think maybe that's something that he's looking at.
Fine. And then the next one is just the legislative change recommendations on table 2, which obviously some can be brought in advance, but actually it's probably better to see what the actual wording is, which is brought forward by the government. The one which I personally have a bit of a problem with, and that's shared with other monitoring officers in the country, is number 8 on table 2. which is to do with the independent persons and the terms of office. We are having not an easy time in getting independent persons, and so therefore, to actually say that it's going to be for a fixed term of 2 years seems to me quite odd, and probably not very practical actually. So therefore, what we are doing at the moment is a period of 4 years, and we are looking to renew that if appropriate. But we'll see what happens with the legislation.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Sorry,
Sorry, Councillor Smith.
just had a question on some other points on table 2. Number 3 there, so
Yeah.
3 of legislative changes. Do members agree that council should be presumed to be acting in an official capacity in their public conduct, including statements on public accessible social media? I think that's really murky because we all wear civil hats. I don't really feel like it's a well-drafted policy. So, for instance, I know Councillor Steve Sims has a specific Facebook page as Councillor Steve Sims. Clearly, if he's commenting on that, then that's obvious what he's doing. If he's acting as himself on his own Facebook page, for instance, then that's a whole different thing. But it would seem to me feel quite restrictive, actually, that you almost sort of never off duty as a councillor, even if you're not speaking in that capacity on social media or any other outlet. What's your opinion on that, Stephen?
I agree absolutely completely on that. Over the years, there has been a lot of controversy over when members are acting as members, and there's been a wide variety of practices and views of different authorities. My own personal view is that it should be fairly restrictive, and that it should be clear that you're acting as a member, or perfectly obvious that you are acting as a representative of the council in order for you to be bound by the code of conduct. But some of my colleagues elsewhere have interpreted that, well, you are a councillor all the time, and if you are making any public utterances, then that inevitably reflects your views as a councillor, and therefore you should be bound by the code of conduct. And social media in particular is a problem because some people, some members, actually on their social Facebook, they describe themselves as a councillor, even when they are obviously commenting on things that they're not as a councillor, personal stuff. So it's not very murky, and I actually use your word, and I think you're right. And I think that the point about the Committee on Standards is that they are saying that rather than have that confusion, perhaps we've got to the stage now where local authorities should have the presumption that councillors are acting in their official capacity, particularly when they are making statements on publicly accessible social media. I personally think that's not gone too far, and I know that there are discussions going on at ministerial level and the government is discussing with members of my own organisation, the Lawyers in Local Government, whether or not that is sustainable and what are the implications. Because what they don't want to do is to change the law and then have unintended consequences.
Yeah, I think we need to be very wary on this, because regardless, obviously, of your opinion, which is obviously very valued, we need to understand what the law is. And we all know there's been various cases of people sort of at work got in trouble through social media, and I'm sure the same could happen with members. And it feels, I think, in particular in a place like Scilly, where it's sort of the division between jobs is pretty thin. I think we need to be very, very careful on this one. I'm not, don't feel comfortable with it myself.
I agree. I'm willing to take that back and to feed it through. And certainly I can speak to Simon Mansell, who's representing rural counties on the working party that's discussing this with civil servants at the moment. So I can certainly take that back to him and ask him to feed that in, because a lot of issues are being taken up nationally, and we need someone at that table that is representing the more rural areas, with the great number of parish councils as well, where similar situations also arise, parish and town councils. So I agree with you. So if you want me to do that, I will do that happily.
Yes, I think that would be a good idea. It's very difficult in a small place. You know, if you're a councillor all the time. And
I think it would put people off standing for council if they effectively couldn't have
private life.
A private life, albeit a public private life. It's the world we live in now.
I think it's the same for members, and I think it's the same for staff as well. You know, if they work for the council, it is very difficult. I don't know what Bob feels about that as well. I mean,
Well, as officers in our code of conduct, we're expected to kind of hold very high standards of behaviour.
yeah.
There is another item on table 2 that I wonder whether members have a view on, and that's item 5 about a voluntary register to include any membership of organisations that seek to influence opinion or public policy or unpaid directorships.
I think.
Now, some authorities do have voluntary codes, voluntary registers, where they do register such matters as that.
I think we already do actually declare voluntary unpaid directorships or membership or trustee. We do.
Okay.
I think everybody does declare, don't they? Yeah.
Okay.
Perhaps we could double check that.
Oh, that's fine then, thank you.
But going back to the other one, I think it would be a good idea to have a talk with Simon Mansell.
Yeah, I will do. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay.
Can I just ask a question
Councillor
on number 7 of table 2?
Yes, that's all.
Yeah, the only thing I sort of read through this and thought, okay, but one thing it doesn't mention is financial gain. I'm not.
Well, in the code for the count of the Isles of Scilly, in part 5B1, certainly it refers to non-pecuniary interest, which might reasonably be regarded as affecting the financial position or well-being of you. What the situation will be under Section 31 if the disclosable pecuniary interest regulations were abolished? I don't know, quite frankly. I think they'll have to look at that in the round. But certainly at the moment, you do have the provisions where you declare a non-pecuniary interest where, ironically, where the financial position is affected.
Okay.
I thought that was quite interesting. When I first came to Cornwall and read that, I thought it's quite an interesting wording, really.
Yeah, my feeling was that maybe this just needed a little bit more work on, was my feeling, and that all members should be happy with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you need to change anything at the moment of that, quite frankly, because I think that your current wording in 5B, little 1 and little 2, about the interest being so significant as like to prejudice your judgment of the public interest is quite well-known wording in law, and it's the changes which put it forward in number 7 is slightly different, and it's just a question of whether or not the nuances we need to go through in more detail at the time.
Okay, thanks.
Any more questions? No, sorry, Stephen, carry on.
No, I was only going to ask, but you beat me to it, Chairman, whether there's any more questions on anything on table 2.
I just had a couple of short ones.
Councillor Smith?
Number 16, just to be clear, so that was, wasn't quite clear on what grounds the local authority was suspending councillors without allowances for up to 6 months.
I agree. It's not clear, is it?
No. It seemed a bit, I didn't really see where that came from, you know, is it linked to sort of misconduct or, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reservations over the Ombudsman getting involved in deciding on allegations of code of conduct breaches. It happens in Wales, and the system apparently does work, and it works well, but there are delays. And of course, the whole point of taking away the national body, the Standards Board for England, was that the delays were getting longer and longer and longer, which is why the decisions of breaches of the code were delegated to local level. But the consequence of that was that the right to suspend or to disqualify was removed. So what apparently this number 14 is talking about is where there's been a suspension locally, and there needs to be a right of appeal. But instead of taking it to the court, it's taken to the Ombudsman. So it's quite, I'm not sure how that would work out. I think there needs to be a lot of more work on that to put some flesh on the bones of it.
Yeah, number 16 just felt like that was an incomplete sentence, really, because it doesn't give any context at all.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so that would be my comment on that. And just a very quick one on 15. I would say that's, for me, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any more questions on table 2? No? Where do we go? Best practice now? Table 3.
So these are the best practice recommendations, and it's almost expected that these should be progressed as soon as possible, really. So there's a number of them. So it would be helpful just to quickly go through the best rules one by one, just to get a view as to what members feel, so that can then be picked up and taken forward. So, number 1, the prohibitions on bullying and harassment. I was intending to review those provisions anyway, but just in case you had any comments in the meantime.
Right. Councillor Nellens first, I think.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's on number 5 on table 3, about updating a gifts and hospitality register at least once a quarter. Is this even in the case where you haven't received anything, you just almost just sign a little book and say nothing received, or is it only when you receive gifts or hospitality? Otherwise, you could have a big blank and wonder whether the councillor has actually been receiving gifts but hasn't registered them, or he just hasn't received anything. As it says, it's not currently done. So we're in a sort of middle there.
I'm not sure I followed that, Chairman. I do apologise. The sound wasn't good.
Yeah, it's just if there is I don't think I've ever received anything in terms of hospitality or gifts, but I've also never signed a book or anything to say I haven't, any sort of register. If you don't receive anything, do you just simply do nothing? Or should there be somewhere where you can say, I have not received anything?
Well, that's the norm, isn't it? When the register is filled in, say no, I've not received any gifts of hospitality. Then it's updated during the year. Does that cover that point? I missed it.
Yeah, it was just, it says in the note, it's not currently done. So
Yeah, I think the fact that we don't update on formally quarterly, so that's what's not currently done. We have the register of interests, or gifts and hospitality. So yeah, we would probably be a quarterly reminder and probably a response saying none.
Yeah, it's only a small point, but I certainly
Yeah.
haven't ever, in all the time I've been a councillor, signed any register for anything.
Anybody else got any questions on table 3?
Yeah, I had a question on
Councillor Smith?
number 3, table 3, number 3, regarding, yeah, sort of looking at what other groups and local authorities are doing. I certainly think it's worth a desk study to maybe look at what perhaps Cornwall or Devon, yeah, let's extend beyond Cornwall. We deal with them a lot, see what other people are doing. With regards comparing with other community organisations, for example, I would guess that their code of conducts are probably not as officious as ours. So I think we'd actually learn more from looking at other local authorities. That's not denigration to organisations, it's just that councils are a different kettle of fish. So yeah, I certainly think that's worth looking at. The check we're up to scratch.
Well,
Yeah, thank you.
sorry. Sorry, yes. Carry on, Stephen. Sorry.
So the other ones are, I suppose number 4 is self-explanatory. Number 5, we've already discussed. Number 6, clear and straightforward public interest test, if only. But we would, I should do my best on that, and take examples from elsewhere. Number 7 is in progress, and number 8, obviously, when appointed. The item 10, the local authority about guidance on the website, that is in place with the links, and the item 14 about reporting on separate bodies and give a full picture of their relationship. There are some bodies that are like that, which is, for example, the sponsors board, and the issue then, and that's something that's being given thought to by Cornwall at the moment, as to how to report on the bodies that have been set up, and the publication of agendas, minutes and annual reports in an accessible place. So that is already in hand, and I don't know whether you have any further comment that you want to make in that regard.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I think regarding the sponsors board, I completely agree. And to be honest, it's not at all transparent, and that's been an issue. I mean, we raised it earlier today, so we clearly need to look at that quite carefully, because that has big implications for the organisation, financially and operationally.
Bob, would you like to answer that one?
Well, not observation around number 14. In the actual report, this recommendation arose from a review of the local enterprise partnerships and revealed a number of inconsistencies across the country. So it's felt that was the main focus for that, but obviously it could be equally applicable to other similar bodies.
In fact, sorry, I would actually add to that. I think we should consider Smart Islands as well, because that's a multi-million programme partnership with many organisations. I think we should be clearer on that. In fact, it's only just recently that the memorandum of understanding between the organisations in Smart Islands has gone public. So it feels like that's quite an important area for transparency.
Absolutely right. Okay, so we'll give some further thought to that, and then the final one is number 15 about the upholding of the ethical framework within the authority. At the moment, I'm not aware that there's any particular regular meetings going on between, for example, the chief executive and the chairman of the council and the chairman of Scrutiny. But whether or not that's something which should be put in hand is something I'd appreciate your views on, because you know far more about the day-to-day issues
and the importance of that, and whether or not that's dealt with in some other way.
We do have an informal meeting of lead members and chairs of committees with the chairman, but there's nothing which the interim chief executive can be invited to. So do we just, it's very informal.
See, often there's some kind of a meeting between the chief executive, sometimes the monitoring officer and the 151 officer, with the group leaders where there are political groups in being. But of course, the outcome is a slightly different animal with the makeup that it's got. But at some point, there needs to be something put in place. Just to tackle things as they arise rather than it fester.
Yes, Bob? No? Yeah, I think we should perhaps look into that.
Okay, we'll do that then. I'll raise that with Mark.
Yes.
And I'll have a chat with him.
Any more? Not any more. Any more questions on this? Let's go down the page.
So are you happy with the recommendations then, Chairman?
Yes. I take the recommendations as read. Could we have a proposer, please? Councillor Nellams, seconded by Councillor Smith. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Agenda number 9, the Scrutiny Committee Work Plan. Bob.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a standing agenda item come to each meeting of the committee. The work plan is presented at Appendix A. This was prepared for the previous meeting date, so we're a month ahead, but as far as I'm aware, there's no substantive changes to that. There's already been mention made at this meeting today about potential for pre-decision scrutiny and how to factor that into the work plan, which is also then married with full council's forward plan to make sure that those kind of things can be done on a timely basis. The review of scrutiny committee activity is on hold because I was put onto a separate project, but this is still very much going to be done. Provide some reassurance. It also, the report itself mentions about information from different service areas about how that can also help scrutiny committee kind of develop its priorities for its work plan. Although over the last month or so, there have been other discussions about how that kind of reporting is going to happen through full council, not necessarily as quoted as a local account, which only refers to one particular service area, but linking in with much more regular and routine reporting of risk and performance. So any questions on the work plan? Very happy to take them.
Yeah, my only comment really was just sort of thinking about the watching brief. I think what we're not maybe doing as a committee is reviewing the actions we've taken over the past year. So take inter-island boating, for example. We made some quite clear recommendations on that. And it was a good piece of work. Now, I know it hasn't disappeared into the ether, but we haven't had any update to the committee. We're not really following progress. So I think we need to be mindful of things like that. And likewise, was mentioned earlier about the freight and how obviously the situation with the steamship company now has changed. Do we need to follow that up? So these sorts of things, I think, need to a watching brief on decisions made through the committee.
I'd agree with that. Are there any other comments? No. Whilst we're here, could we make a time for a workshop that would be suitable? Do you want to do that now? Or?
going to have to dash for
Well,
cruise ships,
Right, okay.
so I'm not really.
We will let you know. Or let's take the recommendations then. Otherwise, we won't be quorum.
No, I don't even rush on now.
No, sorry. No, I was going to make a date, but we'll do the recommendations for this first, that the work plan be approved subject to any amendments made by the committee. We can put in, as councillor Smith said, follow up on freight and the inter-island boating.
But it's a rewording, I think, of what's in brief to
rewording,
make it
okay.
actually relevant to kind of what members would like to see.
Okay.
Yeah, following up on any decisions and recommendations
Yes.
made.
We have a proposal for the recommendations, please. Councillor Watt, seconded by councillor Nellams. All those in favour? Thank you.
Sorry, I thought you were getting a bit warm there.
Meeting,
That's the meeting closed at 26 minutes past 11.